all and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another Discover Wildlife evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lauren Boyd and I oversee the voyage-based trips here at Wildlife Worldwide and the Travelling Naturalist. This evening I'm joined by Bret Charman, who many of you will already know, and also Christian Engelke, who will be the expedition leader on our Svalbard trip next year. So Bret is a very talented photographer and naturalist and will be talking to us about the wildlife of Svalbard and what you can expect from a trip to the region, followed by Christian, who will be providing a little bit more detail specifically on our small ship expeditions to Svalbard, and he will be our expedition leader on board these trips as well. So as ever, there will be the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A forum, and I'll either answer these as we go along or at the end of the talk when I put them to Bret and Christian. And we'll run a poll at the end as well with a list of the various trips featured tonight so that you can request additional information if it is of interest. So to begin with, I will hand over to Bret.
Thanks, Lauren. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be back and presenting to you once more. So as Lauren has said, I'm going to give you a little bit of a taster, I suppose, of the wildlife of Svalbard, just some of the species and sites that you can see. But what I want to do is not be too trip specific, so no itinerary or anything like that. So just to give you a little bit of a taster as to what's in store on a voyage around the Svalbard archipelago. And that sort of Spitsbergen is the main island, which is sort of synonymous, obviously, with the archipelago itself. So I guess the first thing to say is that Svalbard itself is an incredibly remote, wonderful piece of wilderness. It's a wonderful, wonderful sort of, I guess, just Arctic habitat. It's sort of pristine wilderness for the most part, a very small population. And yeah, just some incredible wildlife. I remember the first time I ever went there, I think I went to every single fjord, and I think I then said, this is the most beautiful place I'd ever been. And then sort of the next day, I would say the same thing again. So I realized it was a pretty stupid statement. And actually, these days, I don't sort of repeat that anymore. But it is a wonderful, wonderful place. And for those of you that aren't familiar where Svalbard is, here's a little bit of a sort of outline map, just to give you an idea. To the west of Svalbard is Greenland. To the south is Norway. To the southwest is Iceland. So it's a very remote area of the world, and that makes it a perfect place to explore wildlife and just some sort of really incredible natural scenes as well. So the archipelago is made up of a huge number of islands, but sort of the main island that is the most famous, as I've already mentioned, is Spitsbergen. There's also Nordaustlandet up to the northeast, and then the other sort of two larger islands are Sudersnet and Doritneset as well. So they're sort of some of the more famous places, but we always fly into Longyearbyen. That's probably one of the most important things to say. Every trip will start off in Longyearbyen, and from there we will go on an adventure. And pretty much, I think all of our trips with Wildlife Worldwide are sort of vessel-based. So you can expect to go out on a different type of vessel and go looking for the natural beauty and also the incredible wildlife that's on offer. So I'm just going to now go through some of the amazing things that you can see. I will leave some of the more detailed sort of specifics of our upcoming trip next year with myself and Christian, just to sort of go through some of the details about the ship itself and what we can expect at that specific time of year. But this is sort of a good introduction, I suppose, of some of the things you can see. So one of the first things you'll see when you get on a vessel and you're heading out through the fjords away from Longyearbyen is fulmars. Quite often, particularly in midsummer, these birds are sort of really busy looking for food for their chicks. And they just provide wonderful subjects to photograph and to watch, absolute masters of the sky. And they love following the boats as they churn up the waters. Small fish, things like that, sort of crustaceans are churned up to the water surface, and they have an absolute field day. So they're a really common bird to be seen around. And later in the season as well, it's important to say you can see them in large numbers nesting. Earlier in the season, more likely to get the first bird sort of around looking for food before they're setting up those nests and raising their chicks. Another group of birds that you'll see quite regularly in some areas of the archipelago are the skuas. Arctic skua, Pomerine, long-tailed skua, all of those are possible here, and they are amazing birds. absolutely stunning birds. They can be quite territorial when they're sort of guarding their nests, but they are opportunistic scavengers, predators. They're a bit of a pest for many other species, trying to steal their eggs and chicks and things like that. But they are an amazing group of birds. And for me, actually, those sorts of birds are some of the best to photograph. They're really characterful and great fun. So it's worth saying that as the season changes, the wildlife on offer will change too. So if you go early in the season, which is when we do our photography charter for the most amount of ice possible, there will be less seabirds around. As you go later on into the summer, sort of towards the end of June and July, you're in peak breeding season. And then as the summer goes on again, you'll start to get sort of the fledglings and things like that coming. And then by the end of summer, a lot of the birds will be preparing to head south once more. So it just gives you an idea of sort of what's on offer. One of my favorite birds, though, in the Arctic is the little auk, a relative of the puffin. These diminutive little seabirds are real characters. They've got a great little call, and when you find one of their colonies and you can get within the scree slopes, they're really, really wonderful. They're quite curious. You can get really close to them on a landing. But I actually love seeing them when they're out at sea like this and they're looking for food in small groups, flying across the water's surface. And for me, it's these sorts of scenes that really sum up the wilderness of Svalbard and a real majesty to sort of the feel of the place. But there are plenty of other seabirds too. There's black guillemots, Brunix guillemots. This is a black guillemot, and they can be sometimes photographed from zodiacs, sometimes from your actual vessel as well. Even if it's a big vessel, they can come pretty close. And the smaller vessels obviously provide ample opportunities. And hopefully later on, when Christian is talking, you'll see a couple of images of the boat that I'm using for a photographic trip, and it gives you an idea of the opportunities that presents. So yeah, there's so many different birds on offer throughout the islands, and one of the probably the most iconic, I suppose, of the north is the Atlantic puffin. Yes, obviously we get them in the UK. We're very lucky to have them here, particularly on our Western Isles. But it's really magical to see these birds in the Arctic surrounded by ice and nesting on cliff ledges and things like that. And early in the season, sometimes you will get them coming in snowstorms and things like that. So it's a really fabulous bird to see. And you can get some wonderful opportunities of them both on the water, on the cliffs, etc. So they're just some of the wonderful birds on offer in this magical place. But there really is so much more. So black-legged kittiwakes, you got glaucous gulls, all sorts of specialist birds. Probably one of the most sort of sought after is the ivory gull, which I will get onto in a minute. But the blue tones of the ice in Svalbard are, for me, a particular draw. These big glacial bergs or glacial fronts breaking off, and providing wonderful backdrops for a whole wealth of birds. This is another northern fulmar in a sort of a grey form. But you can see here on this glacier front, there are hundreds of terns desperately trying to feed. Here's where you get the kittiwakes as well. You'll get black guillemots as well underneath these glaciers. So it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And it doesn't matter where you look, not only is the landscape spectacular, but the wildlife is too. And the birds really do just keep on coming. Common eiders are common, plentiful, a really fabulous bird, and actually easily seen around Longyearbyen. It's important to say you don't have to go out on an expedition charter to see plenty of eiders, but it's always worth keeping an eye on a flock like this, particularly if it's a larger flock, to see whether there's a king eider mixed in with them, because you never know, you might get a beautiful view of such a magnificent bird. So it's always worth keeping an eye on them. But for me, one of the most magical birds in the Arctic is the Arctic tern. You know, they are the masters of migration, flying each year between the Arctic and Antarctic, covering thousands of kilometers as they go to breed in the Arctic, and then they head south again. And it really is just a wonderful, wonderful sight. These elegant, beautiful birds, sort of making the most of the opportunities on offer in the sort of the short summer that you get in Svalbard. I personally love being able to photograph them by getting close, slowly on the Zodiac, and working with the local guys to sort of maneuver the boat so as not to scare them, and let them come in and land, such as this bird. And you can just take some amazing pictures, but it doesn't matter if you're not a photographer, because the opportunities on offer, just for those with a passion, are equally rewarding. And that's what I think is really special. And it goes with any of our photography tours as well, I should say, is if you are not interested in photography, but you like the fact that we maybe spend a bit more time, go at a slightly different time of year, don't be put off immediately by the fact it's a photography tour, because you don't have to be a photographer. It just allows you plenty of time and opportunities to enjoy really intimate, incredible wildlife experiences. So I mentioned the ivory gull, a really sought after species and something that is absolutely stunning, a true specialist of the cold waters of the north, the icy plains, the ice fields and sea ice, fast ice, etc. They are specialized in following polar bears and scavenging from their kills. So they are a true specialist species of the north, and something that are a real delight to see. And often if you've got a polar bear around you, then there is a chance you might see ivory gull too. So it's always worth keeping your eyes peeled. Of course, life is never that easy in the Arctic, or anywhere for that matter, and so you have to be prepared to put in a little bit of work sometimes, but it's always worth keeping an eye out for this beautiful white bird. Very easy to identify. It's the only completely white gull around, so very easy to distinguish from the others. But of course, for those of you that aren't interested in birds, well, you need not worry. The Arctic, and in particular Svalbard, for me, it is a wonderful, wonderful place. I haven't included any pictures here of cetaceans, but if you love cetaceans, the Arctic is a really, really magnificent place, and Svalbard, I just think, is incredible. If you go early in the season, there are less cetaceans around because the plankton blooms haven't started, and sort of the associated food isn't on offer to the whales, so they come a little bit later. So by sort of midsummer, you can expect to see the large whales coming back, the great whales, the baleen giants such as the blue whales, fin whales, humpbacks, you name it, they're all around. And there are also beluga whale around as well, so it's always worth, again, keeping your eyes peeled for those white whales. But the pinnipeds are probably more easily seen, I suppose. Obviously, they don't live underwater all the time. They come out and they rest. And this is a bearded seal, one of the largest seals in the Arctic. Absolute monster, this particular individual, but really characterful. And you can see where they get that name, that incredible moustache. The bearded seal certainly lives up to its title. This one is actually molting. This is slightly later in the season, sort of early July time. That's why it's got a strange sort of coloration difference on its head with the dark fur and the sort of rich russety brown color, which likely comes actually from the food that's been eating on the seafloor. When it dives down, it stains its head, perhaps with iron ore, so it gives you an idea of where the color comes from. And this one here has had a huge amount of staining from just such behavior. So yeah, incredible to see these large pinnipeds, these large seals out on the ice, but you also get them swimming. And these are obviously a target for, well, one of our target species, which is a polar bear. So yeah, amazing things. But for me, I think that the ultimate pinniped of the Arctic, and particularly of Svalbard, has to be the walrus. What an amazing species these are. They are giants, and it's hard to describe how big one is if you've never come sort of, well, within a few meters of them. They are absolutely vast. They are pretty smelly, particularly on a warm day. Hopefully by going earlier in the season on our photography trip, that won't be such an issue. But yes, on a warmer day, they can be particularly smelly. And I can tell you, don't ever get it on your clothing, their feces, because it doesn't come out. My Arctic trousers are still smelly after about 10 washes and nearly 2 years later. So yes, be warned, do not lean or kneel in walrus poo. It is not a good idea. But they're great to watch, amazing subjects, wonderful when they're hauled out on ice or on the shore, such as this one. They fight, they bicker, they're sort of just real characters, quite cumbersome on land, but when they're in water, it's a different proposition. And they're sort of really quite elegant and mobile and quite curious too. If you're in the water, they'll quite often come and have a look at you, try and get a better idea, and particularly if you're quiet and not sort of making too much noise, etc. But yes, it's amazing to get close to walrus and to see them reacting and behaving as if you don't exist is obviously what you're after. So when they interact, such as these guys, sort of play fighting out in the water, a little bit of a bicker, then yeah, it's always more and more enjoyable. But like I said, sometimes they do get a little bit curious. This particular one sort of took a liking to us as we were on the shore one time and just sort of came up to us and You know, we were with, it's important to say, we're always with an expedition team. You can't just wander off on your own in Svalbard because of the threat of polar bears. For those of you that don't know, polar bears are probably the only predator on Earth that see human as a natural prey source. Reliably, they don't see you as a predator necessarily. They do see you as a source of food. So we always have to have armed guides for our own safety, and therefore we always must stay as a group. So that's really important to stress. But we'll obviously always go through all of those sort of particulars when we're leading a trip and you're getting your briefing, just to let you know how things work. In terms of the landscapes in Svalbard, I mean, it's hard to describe. I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a beautiful sort of vista with some amazing mountains, blue skies and blue waters and ice everywhere. It really is a winter wonderland, even though it's not winter. It's obviously summer or spring or summer when we're there. But the glaciers are vast, absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. They have sort of more, I don't know, texture, color, sort of feel to them than anything else I've probably ever seen. There's just something magical about being in front of a large glacier. And yeah, the colors, as I said before, those rich blues are just magical, and it gives you an idea of the sense of scale. You know, the mountains rise thousands of feet out of the sea, providing the most epic backdrops to your journeys as you're cruising up the coastline. It really is a wonderful experience, and to be able to go out on a Zodiac cruise and get relatively close to a glacier front, it is absolutely wonderful. I would stress that for safety reasons, obviously, we don't go straight up to the front of them. Glacier carving is not something you want to mess with, so there's very important protocols to follow, but it does provide you with a real sort of sense of grandeur, and also the sounds of the ice moving, and also when the glaciers carve as well is particularly impressive. So yeah, glaciers for me are something that hold a real appeal. And what I absolutely love more than anything are the true Arctic specialists. So the Arctic specialists, I suppose, sort of that are iconic, I suppose, are things like this: the Arctic fox. So the Arctic fox is an amazing species. They cover vast distances in the winter months in pitch black, in complete darkness, following polar bears, trying to scavenge off kills, perhaps dead whales, and they'll walk across the sea ice. And there have been incredible cases of them walking all the way across the sea ice from one side of the Arctic to the other. They really are the most wonderful things. And if you're coming on a photography trip with me early in the season on our small boat charters, one of the great things is that Arctic foxes will still be in their winter coats. They haven't started their molt yet. It will come very soon afterwards, in fact. But we should still hopefully get some foxes in these beautiful white coats. So that's a real draw. Not the brown sort of scruffy coats that you get in summer, although they're equally charming and charismatic. Yeah, hopefully we're going to get them like this. I haven't included any of the brown scruffy individuals on this occasion, but if you would like to see any, I recommend you look them up on Google. They are still beautiful, but I think when they're white like this in the Arctic, that's what you want to see. But of course, probably the most important thing for many people visiting the Arctic is the polar bear. And Svalbard is home to a great population of bears. In fact, earlier in the season, when there's plenty of ice, you have a good chance of seeing bears. And in fact, you do all year around particularly around Spitsbergen and Nordastandet. But it's important to say that these bears can cover vast distances. And it's not impossible to miss them because, you know, it's a light colored bear. And I should stress, I've never seen a polar bear that is white. Despite what you may think, nearly all of them are a yellow color. They actually have black skin, which is quite fascinating. But yes, they are very difficult to spot. And in a landscape that is pretty much monotoned, it is very easy to miss them. So we will always do our best to spot them and to try and find them. And for me, when you find a polar bear, it's like nothing else on Earth. It really is one of the biggest privileges you can ever have in your life. And if we have the opportunity to get out, get off the main boat, and onto a Zodiac for a cruise and then encounter a polar bear, I mean, that's even more special. It's not always possible, but, you know, wherever the opportunities arise, you know, in the past, I've never had any issues with ships or small vessels trying to get people in the water and really experience it and make the most of those opportunities. It really is something to behold. You won't always see them on ice. They're pretty adaptable, particularly later in the season. You will often see them on land. They'll climb sort of cliff edges looking for bird eggs. In this case, this individual was looking for eider duck eggs actually on this sort of impressive granite outcrop. And it really is amazing to see these animals in such vast, sort of impressive landscapes. This one's actually down in the south of the island of Spitsbergen, in a place called Hornsund. And it really was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. I know I said I shouldn't say it, but I can't help myself. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. It's actually the picture that's behind me on my little screen. And it really is just stunning. But it doesn't mean you're going to see polar bears there, obviously. On this occasion, I happen to be very lucky. And actually, I got a Fox's Glacier mint bear as well, which was a real privilege. But as you can see, polar bears most definitely are not white. Yeah, so don't be disappointed if all the bears you see are a yellow tinge, because that is the norm. But yeah, it's an amazing treat. And now, obviously, one of the things, this picture is not mine. I should very clearly state that. What I should state is, if you can get in a zodiac with a polar bear, one of the big differences is you can get eye level with them, particularly if they're on the ice. And for me as a photographer, that is absolutely perfect. The vessel behind is exactly the type of vessel that we try and use in our small boat charters. A small number of passengers, very small groups on the Zodiacs, which I know Christian's sort of going to show and talk about. But it gives you an idea of just what incredible opportunities you can get if you find the pack ice and you find a polar bear on it. Quite often they'll be trying to hunt seals. And so to watch all of this behavior unfold, try and photograph it, is really, really exceptional. One thing I should say as well, that's quite important, and I mentioned that obviously as the season continues into summer, the sort of the wildlife sightings might change. But what's also important to say is that the light changes too. In midsummer, you get these incredible sort of rich coloured days where you get these vivid blues that are behind me now. Earlier in the season, the sun obviously isn't up as high 24 hours a day. So in midsummer, you're looking at 24 hours broad daylight. The sun never gets too low in the sky. So it's very much like it is a summer's day. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. But you don't get those softer tones. Whereas if you go slightly earlier in the season, there is particularly if you get some light cloud cover, there is a chance for some warmer tones. So it's really important to sort of stress that. And then you can get, again, just the most amazing sort of opportunities with these large bears. For me, there is, like I said, nothing better. And I think when you're on the main vessel itself and the call goes out that there's a polar bear, that sense of excitement and anticipation of what's to come is all part of the adventure. And one thing I would say is that spend as much time as you can either on the deck of the vessel. If there's an open bridge policy, which most vessels operate, then please make the most of it. Speak to the crew, enjoy your time, because you might never get another opportunity to do this. And the opportunities presented to you are second to none. And the staff are all incredible. They work hard and they just want you to have the most amazing time. And hopefully the main benefit of that will be some incredible polar bear sightings. But whether you have polar bears, whales, incredible birds, seals, or you just have to put up with the most horrific scenery imaginable, I am sure you're going to have the most amazing time. And here's the sort of scene that's behind me on my little screen. This is the Hornsund, the fjord in the south, the sound in the south, I should probably say. And as you can see, it really is a winter wonderland. And yeah, I really hope that you can all try and join us on one of our amazing voyages and experience incredible landscapes and wildlife such as this. What I'm going to do is just sort of end by sort of showing you a screen, which we'll come back to later on, which gives you a special offer. If you would like to book a holiday, you can save £100. But we'll put this on again at the end of the night, so you don't feel like you have to rush and write the details down right away. And now what I'll do is I'll pass you over to Christian, and then he's going to talk through a little bit about the sort of early season charter that we have as a photography trip. So over to you, Christian, and thanks very much for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brett. Thanks a lot. I will also share my screen now to talk a bit about Svalbard in the early season on the MS Stockholm. Welcome, everyone. Yes, here we go. Yes, everyone. Thanks for the words, Bret. Thanks for the overview. Very good introduction to Svalbard, a place that is very close to my heart. I studied up there when I was, in 2008 for a year, and I never really got away from that little archipelago. And since 2014, I have been working on the MS Stockholm, sometimes with, let's say, normal tourists, and quite often also with photo charters. And as I'm a hobby photographer myself, that's something I really like doing. The Stockholm is perfect for that. Stockholm taking 12 guests only, so 11 plus Bret. That is just that in itself is pretty exclusive. And it is a vessel of charm. It's a vessel that is having a lot of history. It's built in 1953. It's the best maintained vessel from that time that I know up on Svalbard. There's kind of similar vessels around that, you know, from the distance look the same, but if you look carefully, you will see this vessel is really in good shape. There's a lot of love going into this old lady, and we are very happy keeping her alive. Also by you guys coming on board. She is really strong in the ice as well. Yeah? So she's not just a beauty, she's actually strong in the ice, and I will also come back to that. This is a bit of how the interior looks. Very classic old lounge. Same is true for the restaurant. So you both have a restaurant down below. You have a lounge higher up. So you have different rooms. You can also relax, look out, or work on your pictures, whatever you wish. But of course, the heart of the ship is really the bridge. The old classic wooden bridge on the Stockholm. And as Bret said, feel free to be there as much as possible, or out on deck, obviously. But if it's getting a bit cold, if it's getting a bit chilly, come up there, join us for scouting. Me, myself, and Bo, my colleague, will be scouting a lot, looking for polar bears and, you know, other exciting things around. But come there for a little chat, for scouting, for checking, and for just having a great look. I find it also important what Bret said about being a non-photographer. Of course, we really try to maximize photographic options. We kind of chasing the light, as you can see in this picture. But the fact that we are so close to nature, that we're on such a small vessel, that we spend more time with the possible wildlife means everybody that is interested in wildlife might also find this approach very good, because we are not rushed. We are not going from A to B to C to D. If we see something interesting, we're gonna stick to it as well. Expedition cruising is about flexibility, about patience. Yeah? Some of you might have been to the Antarctic, to other regions in the Arctic. And we always say flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Of course, we have an idea. Of course, we have plans, but we will most certainly change them on our way because of wildlife coming in our way, because of weather changing. Sometimes we have to hide from the weather, but also making, of course, taking charge of opportunities that arise. One thing we really have to care about and we really have to think about is the ice. Now, this is an ice shot, and I will come back to that. And that's a typical situation that you would see in May. Every year is different. Years can be dramatically different on a year-to-year basis. But this year, 10th of May, you would have seen that the west coast of Spitsbergen is ice-free. So this white area and blue area, that's ice-free. While the red areas, that's dense pack ice on the east side of Svalbard and also on the north side. If I zoom in, you will see a bit more. This is kind of where Longyearbyen is in Eastfjord, and the west coast in general is ice-free, and that's why we can actually operate there in May. It's not just all frozen over, and this is because of the Gulf Stream, obviously. what is fantastic about early season, and people always ask, what's the best season? I can't answer you. I've been on Svalbard 50 times on voyages like this. I really love the autumn. Many people like the summer, the midsummer. I personally really like early season, as we call it, end of April, May, because of this. Everything is snow covered. Everything is pure. Everything is white. Everything is very much minimalistic. Gives you a very nice backdrop. Quite often, it is actually not the easiest time to find wildlife. It gets a bit easier later in the season because we kind of know where the odd whale carcass might be around, and that might attract bears and this kind of thing. We know our spots. Early season, we are a bit limited because of the ice. And also we have to find out every season on our own again, what are the great spots maybe for this year. You know? But if we find something, we have these kind of backdrops. We have this kind of landscape, very alpine scenery, especially on the west coast of Spitsbergen. And that means that we are actually quite limited in our possibilities for landings. You know? We are not going off the ship to do a landing on shore early season, because quite often there's a foot of ice, there's a meter of ice. You basically need ice crampons and so on to just get ashore. There might be the odd spot, and that's nice. It's nice to change it up. But we will still use the zodiacs, obviously, and I come back to that. But landings, if you want to do long hikes, if you want to really explore the tundra, it's not the right time to come. But you see the ice here. But it is a fantastic time to see this kind of minimalistic colors, this black and white, this scenery, and again this beautiful vessel as a background. You know? The odd beach might already look like this, you know? But very often you would have ice blocking our way, so we can't do landings as we would do later season. Why do I still love it? Well, we still go out quite a bit in zodiacs, depending on the weather, of course, depending on the conditions, depending on what's the nature offers to us. If it's -15, which it could be in May, and windy, well, there's no point in going out because everybody would want to come back after 10 minutes. No? But if it's a nice May day, which can also be the case, and sunshine and something we spot, it really brings us down to the eye level of the animals. And that was a key, what was Bret was talking about, the eye level and being low, being out in the zodiacs like this. We have 2 zodiacs, which means we can take 6 people each, and just that is great for photographers, but also for non-photographers that want to move, that want to look, that want to turn around. Something pops up there, the walrus comes over there. You're not like stuck in a boat with 10, 12 people. No, we just have 6 each. So that is great. When we're looking for land mammals, there's not too much on Svalbard. No? It's more about quality, not so much quantity. But you have the reindeer, the Svalbard reindeer, which is actually a subspecies. It is different from the Scandinavian reindeer. It's more stocky. It's flat. And this is my personal favorite picture I've ever taken in a little bit of a snowstorm in May, because it's a different picture. It's not this picture in the middle of the summer, which is just too bright. We have the fox, the polar fox, fantastic animal. And then May, it should still be in a white color, especially early May. They're all white. Beautiful little creature. And that's pretty much the only 2 land mammals we're talking about, because the polar bear, technically speaking, is a marine mammal. When it comes to the birds, we could be lucky to find a ptarmigan if we can do the odd landing. And again, they are now in their winter feathers in the white. You have to be a bit lucky, but it's a possibility. And it's quite an amazing bird, really, because they're the only ones really staying over winter. All of the other seabirds then are moving in and out of Svalbard. But ptarmigan is actually staying the whole winter. Pretty hardy animals. Yeah, and then we have those seabirds. And correctly, Bret has said that like the main breeding season, the season when they're in the cliffs, that starts a bit later. That starts in June, and into July you get the eggs and the youngsters and so on. But most animals, most birds have already arrived by May time. They're already coming and going. They're already in the waters. They're waiting for the tundra to be snow-free. And those common eiders are very often quite early on Svalbard. And what is especially a treat, and that picture taken from my colleague in the office, Niklas, is that early season is a particularly good season to see the king eiders, not just the common eiders. And for whatever reason, they seem to be a bit more around in May or early June than later in the season. So it's a higher chance of spotting them in the fjords. Very skittish animals, not easy to get close to, but fabulous heads, especially of the males, obviously, and a real treat for the birders, but also for other people just interested in wildlife. All the auks are arriving, yeah. Bret talked about them, but when it comes to the mammals, of course, the marine mammals, that's kind of the treat that most people are coming up for. Obviously, those animals with a character, the walrus, most people come up for the polar bears, right? We are aware of this. This is the reason to go to Svalbard for many of you. But actually, quite often people say afterwards, well, our real highlight were the walrus because they have so much character. There's so much action in the water. They're so agile. No? And again, now they might not be on their hollows yet. They're not on land yet because it's too much ice and snow to actually get up there, which means they're still in the water and they're also hanging out on ice floes. And that's very photogenic very often. And you can see from the angle, this picture taken from a Zodiac, low angle, you really get on eye level or even below eye level with those fantastic wasp creatures. And I prefer them actually on ice over them on land. And then early season is a good time of the year. When it comes to the whales, yeah, most bigger cetaceans, they have this migration, yeah, they go down to the Caribbean, like the humpback whales in wintertime, and then they come back in the summertime, so they come a bit later. But the belugas are around Spitsbergen all year round. And the first ones we see on the west coast are normally around May, and May is a good time to see them. They don't show much of their body, they're just like on this picture, a little bit of the back, but fantastic animals to see that early season. So they are fully possible, and maybe even the best time to see them. When it comes to the ship in the ice again, this is again the Stockholm. This is the old Swedish beauty with the Swedish steel from the 50s. So that's when ships were still built for eternity and not just for 15 or 20 years of lifetime. And you can see that when you're on board. She is really good in the ice. She has an odd 500 horsepower, but I think it's very good horses. No? Very special horses. All diesel engines, still original. And she is not the fastest, but she has this low gear. So she can basically just make her way through the ice as long as there's some open water. She's not an icebreaker, yeah, but she's an ice pusher, and flows like this, she can easily work with to move through. So if we, for instance, would spot a bear a mile away or 2 miles away into that ice, we could actually move towards that bear a little bit and see what is the bear's reaction. Is he maybe curious? Is he walking away? Or is he just staying where he is? Yeah? So we can put ourselves in a position where more things could happen. Yeah, again, this viewing platform from up there, fantastic place to be. And yeah, and it's just scouting. And you will see us a lot out on deck. Yeah? And that's, of course, we will also give lectures, but especially when Bret is talking about photography and maybe you guys are warming up here and there, we will be out there all the time just to look for that little yellow spot in the ice. That's what we look for, a little bit of a yellow, creamy spot in the ice. And one thing is important for the ice. People think ice is ice, but there's a lot of forms of ice. And if you're now talking about the pack ice, which many people want to see, The pack ice normally in May is quite close to the northwest border of Spitsbergen. This is the northwest corner, and you see that red line. That red line, that's the edge of the pack ice, where 90–100% of ice are basically pushing out constantly from the north. And where this is meeting the Gulf Stream, you have the open water. This pack ice can be a very, very good habitat for seeing wildlife. And it's also this classic ice which is pushed upon each other. You have ridges, you have keels, it's not flat. It's a very good ground to hide. Thus, it is also very good ground to hunt for the bears, for these kind of things, right? So we have a bearded seal with a youngster. And you can imagine in this kind of ice, there is a way to actually sneak upon the seals and maybe come from the water side or sneak behind the ice up on them. Here another bearded seal. This one is actually taken from the ship. And that also just to illustrate, yes, it is very good to get the low angle from a Zodiac, but quite often when we are not able to launch the Zodiacs, or there's no point because we would lose time, or if the ice is too dense, as we can see here, it is actually fairly low even on deck. If you're just lying down, if you're trying to find the lowest kind of holes in the on the side, you actually get quite a good view. Not quite on Zodiac level, but pretty good for photography to include the background. Same thing here. This one is also taken from the ship. And that's the bear now in the ice. That's the bear in its natural habitat. And not easy to find, I can tell you. Often a needle in a haystack. And it's not so rare to be 48 hours, 72 hours in the pack ice without finding a sign of bears or tracks or anything. Because this particular year, there may be further to the east and we can't read it yet. So there's always this part to it. But what is interesting as well is that we not only have the pack ice. And the pack ice is kind of red area, both in the northwest, but also in the east. But what we also have in the fjords, and that's where early seasons come into play, is this dark gray areas. You see here, and you also see in those kind of side branches of Isfjord, those little side branches that are actually frozen over. And the fast ice is the fjord freezing over and then being quite solid and straight away frozen. So there's not these ridges, not these keels. It's much more uniform. And it is also a very, very good hunting ground for bears. So we have actually two chances. We not only have the pack ice, which often early season can be tricky, but we also have the fast ice. And this would be a bear in the fast ice. And of course, a bear walking the fast ice edge with the ship parked to the edge is gold. That's what we would hope for with patterns like this. But again, it can of course be that we spot a bear, it's miles away, it's deep into the fast ice. We are not breaking any fast ice because we would actually destroy habitat. We don't want to destroy habitat. We want the ice to stay as long as possible so the bears can hunt ringed seals from the ice. We're actually not even allowed, but we wouldn't want to anyway. But we can park at the edge and we can wait things out. There's always the question how long you want to wait. But these kind of shots on the fast ice, you see very, very uniform, very flat. It nearly looks like a valley, but it's ice. And then having those mountains in the background, like here the Colosseum, beautiful mountains. This is a bear on Svalbard. This is not a bear in Hudson Bay. This is a bear with this kind of special background. And there's not many places in the world you can take a picture like this. Or even walking the fast ice in front of a glacier. Of course, something we could hope for. But of course, I've also done many trips and you don't always get shots like this. But you can put yourself in the right position to at least be able to get these kind of shots if a bear would appear. And that's what it's all about. But it's more than the bears. It is the landscape. It is the scenery. It is the soft light, especially early May. You still get this soft tint to the light. Here taken in the northwest corner of Spitsbergen, just close to the pack ice edge. Fantastic colors, fantastic minimalistic landscape, lines in the landscape. This is a glacier where the wind has blown some lines. And of course the blue of the glaciers. Yeah? So a day or 2 or 3, you can just shoot landscape. It is fantastic. And then of course there's always birds around, but of course this is what we hope for. We all do, and I'm aware of that. And then this just looks different than mid-season on a gray tundra, so to say. Yeah? So back to my question, what is the best season? Always hard to say. Yeah? But I love this. If people think they would land more, they would like to have more opportunities to see birds when they're actually nesting and all that, then maybe, you know, early mid-June can be a better time. There's also trips on the Sjøveien, not really a sister vessel, but also a vessel of the same company that Wildlife Worldwide works with. So there are other options if you think this is a bit too much winter for your sake, but I love it, you know, I have to say. And you already have 24 hours daylight. It's a bit softer than in the midsummer, but it's already midnight sun, and you have those kind of broken off pack ice pieces around, and it is it is really quite something from a ship like this on such a low level. So fantastic trip. I'm looking forward to it together with Bret and Wildlife Worldwide. One last thing I would like to mention is that there are also other trips, and I know that a new thing in the program is actually on the very same vessel, also with me, by the way, going to northern Norway in November time. So whoever is keen on more cetaceans, you can give it a thought. November 2024, off Tromsø, Alta, northern Norway. You also have northern lights around. You have orcas and humpback whales. You have very, very soft light. You have very little light. It's close to darkness, like 18 hours a day. But the little light you get is high quality light. And also there we try obviously to go out in the zodiacs and get good close encounters with the humpbacks, with the orcas, and sometimes with orcas and humpbacks, both kind of trying to get the same herring out of the fjords. Pretty interesting trips. One of my favorites actually. So looking forward to have 3 trips next year with Wildlife Worldwide, because I will be on the Stockholm in May. I will be on the Sjøveien end of May, and I will also be in November on the Stockholm again in this beautiful northern Norway. And where can you take an orca picture with the full moon behind, right? It's not so many places that's actually possible. Hard conditions, but yeah, sometimes we get that as well. So I just wanted to end on that note, but hope I made a little bit more clear what the early season on Svalbard is like as well. So thanks for now, and yeah, back to Lauren and Bret.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Christian. Some amazing photos there throughout both the presentations, both yours and Bret's, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what we can capture next year on the departures. So we will have an opportunity now for people to ask any questions. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A box. But before we get started on those, I will run the poll and give you a quick overview of the trips that we will list. So I'll do that now for you. So there should be a poll up now. So I'll just run through the trips that we've listed on there. So we have our 2 small ship expeditions. So one is photography based aboard the Stockholm with Bret, and the other one is wildlife focused on board the Sjøveien with tour leader Helen Bryan. If you can't make those departure dates, then we do also offer a variety of other itineraries. So we have an around Spitsbergen voyage, which is between 9 and 12 days and has regular departures throughout the Arctic season from May to September. This itinerary is offered on a number of different vessels, and these tend to be slightly bigger than this ship that we've spoken about this evening with Stockholm. So these are between 80 and 120 guests on board, but that is still considered a small ship up in the Arctic. If you really wanted to immerse yourself in the magic of the Arctic, we also have our Svalbard in-depth voyage, which is 15 days, and that has regular departures between June and August. Our general manager, Dan, actually travelled on this voyage aboard the Sylvia Earle earlier this year, so you can read about Dan's experience on his blog, which is on our website. And then the last trip that we featured on the pole is our Fjords, Orca and Aurora expedition in Norway, which is the trip that Christian just spoke about at the end of his presentation. So yeah, this voyage is on board Stockholm that we've seen photos of this evening, and it's 5 nights in duration, focusing on orca, humpback and photography, and that departs in November 2024. So if you'd like a travel plan for one of those trips, please select your preferred itinerary in the poll, and we will send those out to you tomorrow. So we'll just have a look at that. I'll end the poll shortly. Some people still answering there. Perfect. And yeah, we'll have a look to see if we've got any questions here. So one of the things that I was going to ask about as well, actually, I wonder, Bret or Christian, if you could just say a word or two about the type of clothing and how to be prepared for the weather, particularly that early in the season.
Yeah, layers. So you want a really good outer jacket, good outer trousers. But the key thing is under that is to have plenty of layers. So you don't want to have one big thick item of clothing. You want to have a good outer jacket and then a fleece, well, a down jacket, maybe a fleece, t-shirt, thermal layer, something like that. Something where you can regulate your temperature without having to sort of go and sacrifice your big warm item of clothing. Definitely hat, gloves, even liners in your gloves. Merino wool inner gloves are always a good option. And yeah, maybe particularly if it's very cold. So I mean, the coldest I've done trips in is about -25. And yeah, you want to have sort of a couple of pairs of socks on and things like that. So it doesn't matter which part of your body, definitely go for layers. I don't know if Christian has anything to add.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's very fair and very good, and that maximizes your time on deck as well, huh? Because then you're more out, and then you will see more things instead of going in and out all the time. One thing that is fairly new is that we also have new regulations on Svalbard, which actually say when we are Zodiac cruising, we need to have flotation suits. So that's kind of on top of things, but still bring your other stuff too, because it is a bit more comfy out on deck to have something you can move a bit better around with your down jacket or whatever it is.
Okay, great, thank you. We've had a question about the weather, so we've kind of touched on that a little bit there. But this particular person is asking about June. So do you have an idea of kind of temperatures in June at that time of year?
Yeah, there's a fair amount of variation. I mean, I can start with May, because some people might wonder about that too. In May, in average, I would say it's just around 0, and maybe slightly minus. But 2 years ago, we had for 10 days like straight -15, so that can happen. June, I would say normally it's more like 5 or 7 plus, but I had double digits and I had below 0, so it is a bit tricky. But quite often June is a time where we have quite stable weather, I would say, and fairly good weather. So the temperatures are one thing, but quite often not so much wind and quite a lot of sun. And then it's, if it's 5 in the shadow, but it's sunny, it's actually quite warm.
Yeah, I actually had that earlier this year in May when I was out there. The weather was just beautiful every day. It was very warm, and we'd put all of our layers on, and as soon as we could land and start walking, you were taking layers off because it was just too warm, really. So it's nice to have the sun out as well. So yeah, somebody else has asked about some camera equipment. So what lenses do you generally use? 1 to 400 or 600?
That's a good question. I mean, it entirely depends on the situation. So when I go to Svalbard, to give you an idea, I usually take a big prime, which is for me is 500mm. I then usually take a sort of a mid zoom, which is 70 to 200mm. And then I take a wide angle. So whether you've got I don't know, like a 24 to 105 or a 24 to 70 or 16 to 35 mil or anything like that. I think if you want something that kind of captures a little bit of everything, and particularly on the photography trip early in the season, I would say, you know, part of it is going to be landscapes, because at that time of year, as Christian said, it is such a beautiful sort of monotoned world, that actually a lot of it is capturing wildlife in the environment, even if you've got wildlife. So you don't necessarily want to jump straight to your biggest lens. It's definitely worth having a few different options.
While we're talking about camera equipment, somebody's also asked about the digital cameras and keeping them working in the cold temperatures. Do you have any tips for that, Bret?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things you can do for that. One of the big things is keeping batteries in pockets inside sort of your clothing. It just stops them getting cold. Lithium-ion batteries are particularly bad at getting sort of losing power, I suppose, when the temperature drops. Another one is if you've got your camera, don't keep going from hot to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold. You'll find you'll get constant condensation buildup on your lens, particularly. So you're better off either staying outside and then putting it in a bag and letting it slowly warm up when you take it in, or if you can, if there's somewhere you can leave it where it's cooler, then that's a good option too. So it's about sort of trying not to go from extreme temperatures with your camera equipment is a big thing. So yeah, just take some sensible precautions. Even, it sounds weird, but having like a buff or something like that, you can just shove over the end of your lens. It will slowly let the air between the buff and the lens warm up, and then you shouldn't get the condensation build up on the front lens element. So little things like that, but we can go over all of that in more detail.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, we've got a couple of questions about the ship and the accommodation, Christian. So somebody's asked what the sleeping arrangements are like for the cabins on board. So I wondered if you could just speak a little bit about the cabins there and kind of the setup in the cabins for sleeping.
Yes, so it's all double cabins, yeah. So it's all double, and then you have your own facility. So you have your own toilet and shower in that cabin. There's no double beds, so they're all stock beds. So it's a bit old school when it comes to that, but the charm is great, and it's very, very nice little cabins. And as I said, also the rest of the ship very classic and not changed much, apart from the modern equipment, of course, where it's needed.
Yeah. And we've had someone ask about muck boots. Are they provided on board? I don't think they are on this one, are they, Christian?
No, they're not provided on board, but if people need help arranging it, I know that we sometimes there's also a rental in town. So there's help with that. If people think for one trip, I don't want to buy them. It's also, I find them actually very nice also out on deck, not just for the landings, because they're very warm. If you would Zodiac cruise 2 hours in minus temperatures in your hiking boots, you probably have cold feet. In muck boots, you will be fine. So they're actually not only for the landings, they're great also out on deck and then Zodiac.
Okay, great. And yeah, I think one of the last questions we've got is how many ships are we likely to encounter in Svalbard? Are we largely on our own? So I guess, Christian, you might be best placed to answer this, given that you've been up there many, many times before.
It is times are changing. Let's put it that way. Even when I started, I'm not that old. We could really avoid other ships much better than we can do nowadays. There's quite a few competitors out nowadays, but it is one thing we really try, and we really try to still be at a spot where we're alone and not to be at a rushed spot, and rather say, okay, instead of going somewhere where we know there's already 3 ships, we are going somewhere else and try our own luck. What I have to say is, even if there are ships around at that time of year, it is mostly other 12 passenger ships. So there are no big ships around. That starts to come late May, early June, that you have the 100 passengers or then the 200 and so on and so on. In early May, it is pretty much the same size of ships around, 12 passengers, and that itself already means it is not that bad.
That's great, thank you. And the last question, somebody's asked about the food on board. So again, Christian, maybe a question for you. I'm sure that there's lots of hearty meals on board that you've enjoyed.
It's too good.
Yeah.
my good colleague Bo skips a lot of meals because he has to watch. He turned 40. So no, it is very good food. And the standard is that we have a buffet breakfast and lunch. And of course, if people have special requirements, that's always possible, you know, vegetarian, vegan, whatever it is. Just let us know, let you know. And then for dinner, it's a nice 3-course meal, and it is very good food. It is really good. So that shouldn't be that should just be another argument to join.
Excellent, that's great. Thank you for answering all of those questions there. I don't know if either of you have anything else to add before I round up the evening.
Nope.
Oh, all good. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for everyone joining this evening. If you've requested a travel plan, we'll be in touch with those tomorrow, along with the discount code that's mentioned on the screen there. Our Discover Wildlife series is now complete until the new year. So we wish you all a good Christmas and a happy new year. And we look forward to speaking to you soon. So thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Christian and Bret, and good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.